Hi everyone! Today we are working on the Stay Safe holder, a way to hold all the things you need when you are out and about or on travel. You can follow along by getting the pattern at sewnideas.com under the Free Patterns tab. It can hold your face mask, vaccination card, and PCR test. The Stay Safe holder can keep it all together. The left pocket is great for holding different kinds of masks. The right side is good to use for disposable masks. On the back, there's a slot for your vaccination card. If you don't want to bring a lot of masks, then you can just keep your PCR test in the mask pocket instead. Or you can have your masks and your PCR test together, so you know you are covered the whole time. Now you have all you need when you travel or are out and about. I hope you will enjoy the video. Start by printing out the pattern pieces at 100%. On pattern piece number 1 is a 1-inch test square and a 4-centimeter test square. Measure each square, making sure they are the correct size. This will ensure that the rest of your pattern is printed to scale. Pattern piece number 1 comes in 2 pieces and needs to be taped together. But before doing that, you're going to need to cut along this line. Place the cut pattern piece on top of the other pattern piece, then line up at the top and bottom and tape together. Now cut the pattern piece out all the way around at the solid line. Then cut out the rest of your pattern pieces. This is the grain of your fabric. Please note that on the pattern pieces, there is an arrow that says grain. This is on every piece except for number 5, which is for the clear vinyl. The arrow needs to be placed parallel to the grain on the fabric. If you have 7 inches from the grain of your fabric to the top of the arrow, you also need to have 7 inches to the bottom of the arrow. When all fabric and lining pieces have been cut, and all fabrics have been interfaced, here's what you should have. Pattern piece number 1, the main body. 1 in outer fabric and 1 in lining fabric, both of them interfaced. You should also have your Peltex piece, which has been cut out at the broken line. Pattern pieces number 2A and 2B, the mask pocket. 1 in outer fabric of each, both of them interfaced. Pattern piece number 3, the mask holder. You should have 2 of them, both of them interfaced. Pattern pieces number 4, the small flat pieces. You should have 4 of them, all of them interfaced. Pattern piece number 5, the vaccines card holder, 1 in clear vinyl. Elastic, and if you want to have any bling. If you want to add some bling to your holder, you can do that now. Take pattern piece number 1, the main body, in outer fabric. The front of the holder is the right-hand side of the fabric. So if you fold it in half, this would be the front of your holder. Take the bling you want to add and place it where you want it to be. Then sew or install in place. Take pattern piece number 5, the small clear vinyl piece, which is for the vaccination card holder. Fold the main body piece in half. If you added some bling, it should be on this side. Then turn it over to the other side. Now you are going to center the clear vinyl piece so you have the long edges at top and bottom. You need to hold the clear vinyl in place because you cannot pin it. Sew down at the short edge, continue along the bottom edge, and then up at the last short edge, leaving the long top edge open, using a 1/8 inch or 3 mm seam allowance. Cut your elastic to 9 3/4 inch or 24.5 centimeters in length. The elastic should be 3/4 inch or 2 centimeters longer than the height of your holder. This is so when the holder is closed, it won't bend. Measure 1.5 inches or 4 centimeters in from the right top and bottom edge. Mark your place. Place the elastic on top of your markings and pin in place. As you can see, the elastic is longer so that it will not bend when the holder is closed. Fold and tape the excess in place. Sew the elastic in place across the top and bottom edges using a 1/8 inch or 3 mm seam allowance. Take the mask pocket pieces, which are pattern pieces number 2A and 2B. Place them right sides together and line up all of the raw edges. Pin only the angled edge. Sew the angled edge using a 1/4 inch or 7 mm seam allowance. Cut small snips along the angled edge, being careful not to cut into any of your stitches. Turn right side out and carefully poke out your corners. Give it a press, then top stitch the angled edge using a 1/4 inch or 7mm seam allowance. Take the main body, pattern piece number 1, in lining fabric. With the right side facing up, take the mask pocket you just made and place it on top of your lining fabric. Line up the left side, then make sure the top and bottom are aligned as well. Base stitch the pocket along the top, the left, and the bottom edge using a 1/8 inch or 3mm seam allowance. Take the flat pieces, there should be 4 of them, and place 2 of them right sides together. Line up all of your raw edges and pin around 2 of the short edges and 1 long edge. Do the same with the last 2 flat pieces. Using a 1/4 inch or 7mm seam allowance, sew around the pinned edges on each flat piece, being sure to leave the long edges open. Cut off the top 2 corners on both of your pieces, being careful not to cut through any of your stitches. Turn the pieces right side out and carefully poke out your corners. Give them a good press, then top stitch around the sewn edges using a 1/4 inch or 7mm seam allowance. Take one of the flat pieces and measure 1 3/4 inch or 4.5 centimeters in from the right bottom edge. Align the unsewn edge of your flat piece with the bottom of your holder and pin in place. Do the same with the last flat piece, making sure the unsewn edge is in line with the top of your holder and pin in place. Base stitch the flaps in place at the top and at the bottom using a 1/8 inch or 3mm seam allowance. Take the mask holder, pattern pieces number 3, and place them right sides together. Line up all of the raw edges and pin all the way around. Leave a 3-inch or 8-centimeter opening at the bottom of your piece. Sew around all the edges, but remember to leave that bottom open. Use a 1/4 inch or 7mm seam allowance. Cut the 4 corners, then turn right side out using the opening at the bottom of your piece. Carefully poke out your corners. Tuck in the opening seam allowance so that the edges are even with the rest of your seam. Press it in place, then top stitch around all edges using a 1/4 inch or 7mm seam allowance. Take the main body piece and lining fabric with the mask pocket and flaps already attached. Take the mask holder and place it at the right side, 3/4 inch or 2 centimeters in from the right edge and centered. Pin in place and then sew along the right edge using a 1/8 inch or 3mm seam allowance. With the right side of your lining fabric facing up, now take the main body piece and outer fabric and place them right sides together. Make sure that your clear vinyl pocket is on the right and the elastic is at the left. Line up all of your edges and pin all the way around, but leave a 5-inch or 13-centimeter opening at the right side where your mask holder is. Sew around the edges using a 1/4 inch or 7mm seam allowance, being sure to leave the opening. Remove all basting stitches made earlier. To reduce bulk at the seams, you need to cut the layers in between. Fold the edges down so you have one piece of fabric at each side. Cut the layers in between close to the edge without cutting through your stitches. Doing this will help later on so that you don't have to sew through all those layers when doing the top stitch. Now cut each corner, being careful not to go through any of your stitches. Now turn right side out using the opening and carefully poke out your corners. Make sure your pocket is facing on the correct side. If it needs to be turned, go ahead and do that now. Tuck the opening seam allowance in so that it is even with the rest of the seam. Remove the tape used to hold the elastic in place and press the holder. Be careful not to touch the clear vinyl. Take your Peltex piece and place it on top of your holder. Check to see if you have at least 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter of free space around all edges. If your Peltex piece is too big, go ahead and trim it down. This is so that later on when you top stitch, there is nothing in the seams. Fold the Peltex piece and slide it in through the opening, then unfold it inside. Now top stitch around all edges using a 1/8 inch to a 1/4 inch or 3 millimeter to a 7 millimeter seam allowance. When you do the top stitching, be sure to hold the elastic out of the way so as not to sew it. Now you are going to find the fold line. Simply measure from side to side and mark the middle. I like to use a sewing pin to mark my place. However, you can use your preferred marking tool for this step. Sew on your marked line, but remember to change your thread colors so that it matches your fabric on both sides. Now you can add book corners if you want to. You can start by adding a few drops of glue into the casing of the book corners to make it more secure. The ones I use, you can easily press into place by hand. Now your Stay Safe holder is finished. Congratulations! I know you've done a wonderful job. Add in all your different kinds of masks and then close it using the elastic. You can also add in your vaccination card into the clear vinyl pocket on the back. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned a lot along the way. Until next time, stay safe everybody. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You can find this pattern and more at sewnideas.com.